my children were in high school and one was a freshman in college. My need to do something to change my life, de-stress, and tap into the things I love. And I thought about many different things over a 4 or 5 year period, but I kept coming back to flowers. I was always an avid weekend gardener. We're on a property that we bought 27 years ago, which had nothing on it except old cars and tractors and tires and things that people had dumped. So when we built this house, and I created all the gardens from nothing. So I learned a lot by trial and error. I had been an avid gardener even before we moved out here. And I kept realizing how much I just enjoyed producing flowers. And I got to the point where I was growing so many that I was giving away armfuls by the end of every summer. And then I just decided to try to make a business out of it. And I did a lot of market research, and I went to a couple of conferences. I joined the Professional Association of Flower Growers, called the Association of the Specialty Flower Growers. And I went to a couple of the meetings. I volunteered as an apprentice on 2 different significant flower farms, one in Southern Virginia called Woolham Gardens, and one in Eastern Montgomery County called Plant Masters. And I did that, not big long periods of time, 3 days with one and 5 days with another, and then decided I really wanted to make a go of it. And what you see over here, what you're going to see, was a piece of our farm that this is a little less than 2 acres, and then there's a lot more area wrapped around the house that was kind of not used. A lot of our land is in hay, but this piece was too narrow and it's separate from the rest of the hay field, so it seemed to make sense to just plow it up and see if I could turn it into a flower farm. And that was 9 years ago, and I was very fortunate to just be on the front end of the movement for local produce. People were really getting interested in local food, local wine, local beer. I thought local flowers would be right behind it, and that turned out to be true. Okay, so most of them are planted with all of the plants 9 inches apart. So that forces them to grow up tall and straight. But as you can see here, we use for many things this nylon support netting, and which is supported by rebar poles, which you might use support fence posts if you grow dahlias, for example. But those big metal fence posts are very expensive. This is a much less expensive way to do it. And everybody asks about the tennis balls. That's so we don't cut ourselves on the sharp edge, because when flowers get big, you can't even see the support. So you reach down and you could cut yourself on that. You'll also notice that some rows look completely dormant and some are still flowering, which means you plan for when you know one crop is going to start to fade because it's past its time or it's getting too hot, then you have another one that's ready to go. But now it's the end of the season, so I'm not doing any more succession planting. You'll also notice this landscape fabric. Different people in the flower farming industry use different things. I started out by trying black plastic mulch. I found that it was too much to dispose of and it's not biodegradable at the end of the summer. So I use now this woven black fabric which water can get through. This is our leaf stripping table where when we cut, I have a crew who works with me. We bring a wagon full of buckets of cool water with floral life in them. We cut armfuls of them. When you get an armful that's so big you can't handle it anymore, you come put it on the stripping table and strip the leaves off before you put it in the bucket. As you know, you don't want to have any leaves before the water line because it puts bacteria in raised beds. And of course we're all growing that way now because it's easier on the back, the soil stays looser, they're much easier to work. And I tell you a very interesting thing I discovered as a flower farmer I never would have thought of. When these are not in use in the fall, when your last vegetable crops die, I plant about 5,000 tulip bulbs in these boxes. And you can plant tulip bulbs as close together as eggs in an egg carton. What we do is just take the top 6 inches out, put the tulip bulbs in, and then put the soil back on top of them. And then when they come up in the spring, I sell them wholesale to florists. I pull the entire bulb from in newspaper, and you can keep them in a cooler or refrigerator if you just wanted to hold tulips for an occasion that's 2 or 3 weeks later. A lot of you may be familiar with Hyacinth Bean. It's literally in the bean family. You see this purple bean here. But for a design standpoint, when you're doing an arrangement for a garden club show, it gives you that beautiful arching look, both the branches that don't even have flowers on them, the branches with flowers, and the bean pods. It's just really a very versatile plant. And this is a fun way to grow it. I just put poles up and put netting over this way so it creates an arch from one of my raised beds to the other. And gives me a place to stand in the shade when I just want a few minutes of shade. So I have about 90 peonies in the ground. I have the main colors that florists like. But this year I got Peony Botrytis. Probably a lot of you have heard of it. Maybe you've seen it. You get these brown spots on your leaves. So I had to cut the leaves down early so that the disease didn't go down into the root. And I'm hoping they'll be back. You know, peonies are tough. I think they probably will be, but and they were beautiful when they were blooming. This happened after their bloom time when the terrible heat set in. These 6 beds are where I grow a lot of my cool season hardy annuals. And I start them from seed in the heat of summer in my basement in August. Hundreds and hundreds of snapdragons, feverfew, larkspur, agrostemma, corncockle, a lot of things like that you would know. You plant them, and then when you get a nice little seedling, and I start them in trays of 128, you plant them in the fall. They love the cool weather. They grow, they settle in. Then you can just cover them with a frost cloth over the winter, and then they just take off in the spring. And you get beautiful plants with flowers probably a month before you would get them if you planted them in the late winter. One of the really big challenges is you make all this investment in time and labor, and sometimes things just don't go well. This year, because of the intense heat and the lack of the pressure going down at night, the lack of the temperature going down at night, we had terrible fungus. It was perfect conditions for fungus. So these are 2 long rows. This is zinnias. They're 3 feet wide and 150 feet long that succumbed to fungus in about 5 days. They all died. These celosia, same thing. A lot of them did not survive. Some of them are doing okay. And you can see there's one variety of celosia down there that's thriving. It doesn't care what the weather does. Unfortunately, it's the least useful one in terms of color and style. Happening with these 2 rows of sunflowers, I'm having my soil tested again. I test it every year. The first round of sunflowers was beautiful. The second round just never grew.
How much do you have to manipulate your soil?
I have to do a lot of soil work because the things that we grow take a lot out of the soil. Big annuals, zinnias, sunflowers, marigolds take a lot out of the soil. So every fall when I pull everything out, I test the soil, send it to a lab, and I test it by zone, and then I add whatever they recommend. Sometimes it's lime, sometimes it's sulfur, always compost. It depends on what the recommendations, and it can vary a lot from one year to the next. I don't know why that is, but it happens. So this is an unheated hoop house, which is different from a greenhouse. A greenhouse means something that has artificial heat, whether it's electric heat or propane heat or whatever. This is passive solar with no artificial heat. It gets very hot in the daytime when it's sunny, but it has vents that open and I can roll up the sides, and then I also have shade cloth on it. In the heat of the summer, when it's too hot for anything in here to grow, except the eucalyptus. But this gives you season extension, so you can plant things in here that will start a good 6-8 weeks earlier than they would if you planted them outside, and again into the fall. So I grow very high value things in here. This is prime real estate, so I try to grow things that are valuable to florists and year round. This is Hypericum. I grow the salmon colored berries, the white berries, and the green berries, and florists love that. And I also grow Dusty Miller, which gets huge in here, and florists really love that for table arrangements and brides bouquets. And then further down you'll see eucalyptus. I grow eucalyptus, which would not survive the winter here outside, but in the hoop house it's a perennial. It's getting bigger and bigger every year, and I just sell big bunches. So this is a neat gadget that saves a lot of stress on the hand. If you're making a mixed bouquet or just working with flowers that you've cut to put them in the cooler, you can just do one whole batch at a time, and it saves you about 10 or 15 cuts.